Well, the third episode of Alien Earth revealed what the chestburster embryo really looks like. The fourth gave us the lungburster, a version of a chestburster that gestated inside a pair of lungs. But more importantly, the episode shed light on the psychology and behavior of this little guy, telling us that it responds to maternal care like any youngling, and that kinda proves that Wendy might just serve as the Xenomorph Queen in the future episodes of Alien Earth. But while we wait to see how that pans out, in this video, we're going to explore the anatomy of the lungburster and everything else there is to explore about this baby Xeno. Before we begin though, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. And now, let's begin. The first stage. The story of the lungburster in Alien Earth didn't really start with some unfortunate soul cocooned to a wall in a xenomorph hive. It actually starts on a table in the third episode of Alien Earth, with Kirsch dragging a facehugger out of an ovomorph and deciding to cut it open. The first thing he does is knock it out with an electric charge because the thing isn't about to sit still, or maybe it would have if Wendy had done her little thing. Anyways, the facehugger thrashes around, tail coiling and those finger-like limbs trying to break free, but the electric shock keeps it down for good. Once Kirsch has the creature secured, he goes in with a scalpel. The first cut peels back its outer layer, and what spills out isn't the acidic blood that we usually associate with the species. Instead, it almost looks like fat tissue, organic matter holding the structure together. It's only after he digs deeper that the green blood leaks out, and although the blood is caustic, it doesn't eat through the facehugger itself, which is proof that its insides are insulated to the effects of the acidic blood, which is something that people only speculated about up until now. Kirsch goes further and sees something new. Inside the body, there's this black residue. At first glance, it looks like tar in a smoker's lung, but the facehugger's not a smoker, is it? Clearly, this black substance is a version of the black goo, the same mutagenic substance the engineers perfected for their own experiments. You may remember its refined form from Alien Romulus, rebranded as Z01, the very thing responsible for the grotesque offspring hybrid. That ties the facehugger directly back to the engineer's tinkering, and suddenly its biology feels a lot less like nature and more like deliberate design. But Kirsch wasn't done with the dissection, and he explores further inside the facehugger's body. Using tweezers, he plucks the cute little chestburster embryo out and, instead of disposing of it, drops it into a glass. From there, this tadpole-like embryo is transferred into a tank with Joe's lung. In episode 4, Boy Cavalier asks Joe how his new lung felt, and he also tells Joe that Joe has no idea what was done to his original lungs. But we know that lungs were supposed to be used as a host for the chestburster's embryo's gestation. The embryo inspects the lung, senses it's alive, and burrows inside to gestate. And that, people, is the seed of the lungburster, a variant whose light brown head sets it apart from the typical black-skulled chestbursters we're used to. Of course, this is because of the DNA reflex, and the resultant creature that we see in episode 4 is the result of the creature adopting a bit of the lung's color. Before we move forward, we'll quickly brush upon this small but telling detail about Wendy. While Kirsch is performing this autopsy, the dead facehugger lets out those faint screeches, and the ovomorphs in the background seem to respond in kind. When he picks up the chestburster embryo, the screams of the tiny creature become even more profound and high-pitched, so much so that humans or other hybrids like Nibs or Toodles can't hear it. However, Wendy reacts as if she's in severe physical pain, kinda like Superman's hearing abilities getting the better of him until he learned to control them. It turns out she can hear frequencies up to 77,000 hertz, far beyond the human range of 20,000. That ability is what later allows her to communicate with the xenomorphs, but here it just highlights how the creatures never really die quietly. Even in dissection, they're still connected, still echoing to one another. And as for Wendy, it was revealed by inside sources that her ability to hear and communicate with xenomorphs is nothing but an anomaly in her body and design. It's not like she's special, not in any supernatural way. It's just a disability that seems to serve as an ability, if you will. But without digressing any further, let's move on to the lungburster itself. The lungburster responds to motherly instincts. By the fourth episode, Boy Cavalier helped Wendy with how to control her own voice and imitate a xenomorph's cries. Close to the end of the episode, we see Wendy staring at the tank that stored her brother's lungs. Kirsch is standing in the lab watching Wendy stare down at the containment cube. As we mentioned earlier, inside Hermit's surgically removed lung was the tadpole-like Xeno embryo that Kirsch had earlier pulled from a facehugger. And to make things worse, you remember Boy Cavalier's jab about the old lung thing. Anyways, Wendy, while staring at the tank with all her focus, seems to whistle something, giving the appearance of her communicating or summoning the creature inside her brother's old lungs. Next thing we know, the embryo inside the lung responds to this communication and tries to do its thing with the lungs, which first start to bleed, and then the glass cracks, splinters, and bursts. The lungburster slithers free, lands on a nearby table, and rears up like a cobra ready to strike. Meanwhile, Kirsch continues to see these events unfold as Wendy tilts her head and clearly starts communicating with the lungburster, which goes from violent to docile in a matter of seconds. It's like the Xeno sees her as its mother and gets calm and comforted when she coos at it. It's absurdly intimate and equally unsettling precisely because it works. What use does a Xeno have for plastic and silicone? None, to be precise, but Wendy isn't only machine, right? However, it seems that the Xenomorph shows some sort of childlike instinct, and their connection to a Xenomorph Queen is beyond the relationship of a queen and her helpful and hardworking drone, like in the case of bees or ants. In the case of xenomorphs, they share a bond shared by any complex or sentient organism. The lungburster doesn't strictly need a human host. Yeah, so the important thing to learn here is that the chestbursters don't strictly need a living human host. A single lung kept alive through artificial means can do the job. That sounds like a very trivial detail, but it's not. You see, this changes the entire framework of xenomorph reproduction. For decades, the assumption was that a host body was essential, but now, with a lung on life support, the embryo can still reach maturity. When a lung can get the job done, another organ large enough can do it too. For instance, the stomach, or maybe the liver, or the heart. For Prodigy, that's a weapon. Weyland-Yutani always monopolized the Xeno because they were the only corporation reckless and resourceful enough to sustain live hosts. If Prodigy has figured out how to bypass that bottleneck, they suddenly hold leverage. You don't need a living body anymore, you just need an organ. And with dying workers, volunteers pulled from colonies, or bodies on ice, a steady supply isn't impossible. The implications are heavy. If Prodigy can replicate xenomorphs at a scale with far fewer mortality rates, they're not out of the corporate arms race yet. Boy Cavalier doesn't need an endless stream of living prisoners. Wendy's role, then, becomes even more critical. She isn't unique because of her hybrid status, she's unique because her mind processes alien frequencies like language. She can hear the screeches and pitches no human can, which means she can communicate. And if she can, then that function can be replicated. Her so-called conversations can be broken down, codified, uploaded, and redistributed across Prodigy's hybrid and android networks. What started as one synthetic human interface could become a company-wide ability with an entire fleet of machines able to command xenomorphs, and that would be weaponizing the Xenos in a real sense. That brings us back to the power struggle inside Prodigy. Wendy may resist being turned into a tool for the corporation, but Boy Cavalier doesn't need her loyalty. All he needs is the code that runs through her. Someone like Curly, desperate to rise in his ranks, would step in and weaponize what Wendy resists. But we digress. Lungburster's body. So if you look closely, you'll notice that the lungburster has the xenomorph arms attached to its body, as if they're locked and glued to the chest, waiting to get free as the creature grows. The same can be said about its legs. A few shots of the xenomorph with light brown head show that it has a distinct tail. A tail that's slightly different when compared to other xenomorphs. I'm assuming that Alien Earth will, for the first time, show us in detail the transition of a chestburster, or lungburster in this case, into a fully grown xenomorph drone. The true meaning behind a chestburster and its original design. The chestburster has always been one of the most disturbing concepts to come out of Alien, and it shows birth turned inside out. New life arriving at the cost of a horrifying death. It was designed to be the moment that defined the film, the point where the audience either took the threat seriously or laughed it off. If the sequence fell flat, the whole movie would collapse with it. Ridley Scott and his team knew the stakes, which is why the design process for the infant creature dragged through false starts, abandoned sketches, and trial after trial before they found the right mix of grotesque and believable. Scott's early guidance to H.R. Giger was to look at Francis Bacon's paintings, which the director already admired for their ability to unsettle. Bacon's warped bodies and screaming mouths gave Giger the first spark. His initial design, however, was less than terrifying. It looked like a skinned bird with teeth. Roger Dickon, the effects artist tasked with building it, described it bluntly as plucked turkey, veined, bang-filled, and unconvincing. Dickon did his best to translate Giger's sketch into a working puppet, but the result was unintentionally comic. Scott knew instantly they had to start over. The scene couldn't afford laughs. Back to the drawing board, Scott pushed for something sleeker, smoother, more obscene in its simplicity. He didn't want warts, claws, or messy detail. He wanted an embryo that already hinted at the adult monster, a biological bridge between baby and big chap. One version Giger drew had oversized fangs and a twisted body, which Dan O'Bannon supported, but Scott vetoed it. He wanted the creature's head tilted back, phallic and reptilian, more offensive in its shape than in its decoration. It had to feel inevitable. It belonged in the alien life cycle, but also intrusive, an unwanted birth that carried its own dark logic. Dickon eventually produced the final chestburster with Scott hovering close. The two of them, over cups of tea, worked through versions of tails and heads until the look settled into the long worm-like body we know, banana-shaped, eyeless, with a head that just gave enough of a glimpse of the adult form. Early models had arms, but those were scrapped as they made it too busy, too monster-like, when the horror was in how naked and unfinished it appeared. Mechanically, the puppet was a clever bit of engineering. A metal rod ran through its length with a spring in the neck to give it flexibility. The operator, hidden under the table or costume, could tug a ring connected to a wire, making the head jerk forward as if alive. Air bladders gave the impression of breathing, while small squeeze bulbs animated the jaw and stubs where arms once were. Even the gills on the side of its head pulsed with life thanks to this simple, effective setup. What started as something laughable has been stripped down into something disturbingly real. Marvelous verdict! Alien Earth has been digging into identity and humanity since the start, but the fourth episode, titled Observation, may be the boldest of all episodes in Season 1. The episode's most striking revelation is that Wendy, as a hybrid, can actually hear the Xenomorph's alien language and respond to it. Instead of recoiling in fear, she leans into it with excitement. For her, this isn't a curse, but a gift, a chance to finally have a voice that matters, one that can bridge the gap no one else has even attempted to cross. The implications are staggering. A human consciousness in a robotic body suddenly able to converse with one of the deadliest extraterrestrial species ever conceived? Well, that alone could redefine the alien mythos. And the show seems well aware that this might be the entire point of its existence. What makes the sequence work is the tone. Wendy's communication with the creature feels tender and strangely uplifting, as though plucked from the philosophical awe of Prometheus and the linguistic wonder of Arrival. Alien Earth manages this without tipping into sentimentality, and while the nod to Peter Pan's ticking crocodile metaphor feels a little smug, the core idea lands. Wendy isn't terrified of the alien, she's exhilarated. For a character caught between categories like human, machine, and experiment, this new ability turns her into something irreplaceable. Balancing that is another jolt of horror, this time through a sheep infection sequence that unfolds like a grotesque science experiment. The sheep becomes a vessel for infiltration and revival, delivering body horror that is viscerally disturbing in ways even the Xenomorph doesn't always achieve. It's classic alien in its physicality, but then veers into new territory, layering dread with originality. Even more compelling are the contrasting reactions from Kirsch and Cavalier, which gives the scene extra tension. The fact that a sheep, a stand-in for innocence and routine, provides one of the series' most unnerving sequences, shows just how finely tuned the tone has become. By the end of Observation, the episode leaves viewers with a mix of awe and dread. Wendy's joy at being able to connect with the alien and her instinct to nurture it reframes the Xenomorph not as a pure engine of death, but as something that might respond to care. That doesn't necessarily mean redemption, and it may well spell disaster, but the suggestion itself is quite something in and of itself. If Alien Earth dares to explore xenomorphs through the lens of nature versus nurture, the franchise could take a turn that redefines its most infamous monster. It's risky, it's controversial, but it's also exactly why the show feels alive. Much like Kirsch quietly observing Wendy's encounter, the audience is left wide-eyed, curious, and maybe even a little hopeful, waiting to see where this strange new path leads. Unfortunately, guys, that's all we got for you this time, but we hope you liked it. And if you have any other thoughts on the thematic meaning of this whole thing, we'd love to read them down in the comments. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.